Hey everybody, it's Jim. We're going to talk today about probably one of the most non-glamorous aspects of audio production, audio engineering, what have you, and that is session organization. This is a very important thing, and I think often overlooked aspect of being able to work efficiently within a project as an engineer, or even as a content creator or a producer, however you want to say that. Being organized is going to make you so much more efficient. You can know quick keys, you can know EQ tricks, you can set up templates, and even setting up templates is a way to be organized within your session. But when it comes down to it, you can't avoid it. If you are not organized within your session, you will not work as efficiently as you can be. So I think this is an important topic to look at, and there's many aspects to it. One of them is color coding everything. Like for example, in this track, if you know, like let's say you work the same way every time within a session to where it's just kind of drilled into your head. When I'm looking for a bass track, I'm going to look for an orange one. Or if I'm going to look for a drum track, I'm going to look for a green one. Or if I'm going to look for a lead pad track, I'm going to look for one that's like this color or this color. Or if I'm going to look for pads, I'm looking for something that's this color. If you're working in that way, it's a lot easier for you to find exactly what you're looking for, to navigate to the right group, to get to what you're looking for. If everything is sporadic like this, it's going to be really difficult for you to find what it is that you need to adjust or what it is that you need to change. So, like for example, these tracks down here, the track title bar here is like this yellow green color, and the clips inside the track are actually a red. So if you're used to working within a session to where when you see red, you automatically think bass or pads or whatever your color scheme is, this can be really confusing. Now, the artist in this case might know that his session is chaotic and he might just have a memory for where things have gone within it. But if you are collaborating with someone, or if you're passing this session off, like what's the case here, to an engineer to mix it or to organize your session for you, this is not going to be conducive to you getting the most bang for your buck. Because like me, a lot of mix engineers charge by the hour. So if we're taking all that much more time to navigate through your session, it's going to be more cost to you as a creator in the end. So that's definitely something to think about. Putting like elements together is also another big thing. You can see this is pretty random. We're not even really sure what this is. Definitely not sure what this is. Vocal, sure. Piano, great. Crowd, which is another vocal. Vox, okay, cool. These are more like, I would call these lead elements, anything that's an arpeggiator. We got some basses here. Looks like these might all be basses. Some strings here. Got some more strings. I'm guessing this is a vocal, so that should be up with the other vocals. Not sure. Probably vocal. Some more drums down here. Not really sure. Could be keys or shaker. Don't really know by the track title. Let's go ahead and check that out. Yep, definitely. So keys as in metal keys. Definitely good to pay attention to the naming of your tracks as well. So you get the point of what I'm saying here. Another thing is to get rid of unnecessary things that pertain to arrangement only. Like we have, for example, some deactivated clips here, and the track itself is named Might Remove. When you hand this off to a mix engineer and you're telling the mix engineer to mix the track down, essentially what you're saying is the arrangement is done. Like we're not making any more changes here. The arrangement is completely done. So just get these things out of here. Like don't leave these decisions until the end of the project when it's already passed off to the mix engineer, because that's just more stuff that's going to take more time. I actually spoke to the artist in this case because I was confused about why there were empty MIDI tracks that didn't seem to have any fold on or anything like that, and he said that he was using these for to keep the scale intact so that if he had to add things to the project, he could just go back to this track for reference. And I'm assuming his reference was the track titles here, or the titles within the actual region. So that's fine, but for the purposes of mixdown, just get rid of them because they're just going to take up real estate. Also, tracks that are not named properly. We looked at Keys Shaker, but another one that I had noticed when I started working on this was FX. I would normally put this with all of my sound effects, but upon further investigation, that's a crash cymbal. And this crash cymbal actually gives you something further to pay attention to when it comes to cleaning up a session. And that is cleaning up all of your effects and cleaning up all of your audio regions. For example, this crash cymbal here, you could probably tell just by listening to it, it's truncated. Like it sounds like a crash cymbal sample that was abbreviated at the end. The tail doesn't go all the way out. So since this is already printed and we don't have anything else on the track to call attention to, a quick fix that I would do for this is probably just to duplicate the track. And we'll call this crash, and we'll call this one crash tail. If you're working in Ableton and you want to know how to quickly rename tracks like that, you just click on the track header here and hit Command R to rename, and then while it's still in that open menu, like if you click off of it, this won't work, but while you're still renaming it, you can hit Tab and it'll go to the next track and you can rename the next track. So we have crash and crash tail. Now on this one, I'm going to open up our browser here and get out a reverb plugin, and we're going to give this probably around 10 seconds worth of space, give it a lot of room, no pre-delay, crank up the density, and we'll bring this up to about 75%. Now let's just listen to the crash cymbal with this. Cool. Since it's a crash, we'll probably get rid of some of those lower frequencies. Great, sounds good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to freeze. And flatten. Then we'll zoom out a little bit. We'll highlight both of these. Not sure what that is. Yep, don't know. Reverb plugin must have done something there. So we don't really need this because that's after the end of the sound. And we'll go to, oh, come on now, narrowest, and we'll split that and get rid of that at the end. Then our fade bar is still showing here. That's probably well after the end of the sound. Yep, and so is this too. So just go ahead and get rid of that. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a fade at the beginning of this so that we can keep the transient of the crash sound here, and then this will be the tail. So I'm actually going to split this and get rid of this here, and we'll fade this down. And we'll hear both of these at the same time. And there you have it. You have a crash cymbal that actually tails all the way out. So just little things like that you can do to clean up the session. Like, it's not just a visual cleanup, it's also an auditory cleanup. So you can have things like that going on too. Here we see some more deactivated clips. Just get those out of there. Another thing is, and I don't know if this will be a prime example of this, but this looks like a reference track. For reference, you should probably just put all of your reference tracks at the top of the session or somewhere up there. And I just put that in a group. But for the example of this, this is obviously a long track of audio. It's a reference track. Probably not the best example of something like this, but who has worked in a session before where you have a hi-hat track that was just printed down to audio? And let's say for the intro of the track, you might have the hi-hats starting at bar 9 or somewhere around there. And then like for the break in the middle, there's really no hi-hats here, and there's really no hi-hats over here because there's another breakdown section, and they go throughout the end of the thing, and then in the outro to the track, there's no hi-hats or anything like that. Get that stuff out of there as far as a region goes. So like say this is your first breakdown in the beginning of the track. Just take all that dead space out of there. You know, if you have a little breakdown here with your hi-hats, get that space out of there. That way, when you can't see the audio waveform inside the track, you can at least tell that there's nothing that's supposed to be going on with this track at that moment. That way, if you see activity over here in the meter bridge and there's no audio region here, you know something is messed up as far as your routing goes. It makes it so much easier visually for you to be able to scroll through the track and say, okay, I know nothing's going on. Like let's say your playhead is here and you're hearing like a phantom noise and you're like, I have no idea what that is. Well, because your playhead is here, if you scroll the session, you know it's not this track, it's not any of these tracks, it's not these tracks here, there's nothing in them. Might be this one, might be that one, might be that one. But you know basically for sure that it's not any of these, and then you can start looking at your meter bridges. So that's another part of keeping your session organized, because I noticed there were quite a few tracks in here that were like that, where it was just a solid print, and there was really nothing else going on. Same thing goes for MIDI tracks too. You know, if you have MIDI data here, there's no reason to have any of this stuff here. You can get rid of it. Just quick tips to tidy up the session even more. You can scroll through very quickly and see what's going on. Also, if you're in the mix stage and you get rid of this and you get rid of your browser window, you're working with quite a bit of real estate here. And that's optimal. Like if you're just navigating through your session and you're trying to make the most out of your real estate, that's great. A lot of people that use Ableton don't know that you can get rid of this. You actually can. It's called the overview section of the screen. And if you just hit Command Option O, it will go away. So lots of screen real estate there. Here in this particular session, we're looking at the next created track would be 89. So we're looking at 88 tracks that are currently active in the session. I've worked on sessions that are 100, 130, 150 tracks, especially if you're one of those people that doesn't like to stem things out and you might have something that lasts 4 bars and it's a little riser, but you have a whole track dedicated to that. This window can get very, very large and it can intrude on a lot of your screen. So definitely something to consider there. The other thing too, and I had seen a lot of this in this session too, but I can't remember right offhand what tracks it was a problem with, but topping and tailing. And what I mean by that is taking audio tracks that they don't have clean fades at the end, or there's something going on where there's a click in the audio. You noticed when we rendered out that reverb tail of the crash cymbal, there was a little bit of noise at the end there. Cleaning that stuff up, because at the end of the session, when you're in mixdown or when you're in mastering mode or anything like that, that kind of stuff is going to get sent to all of the compressors, and any noise that gets sent to a compressor, whether it's a tiny little click or a pop or some kind of like swell at the end of an audio file that's not supposed to be there, those all have the potential to trigger those compressors. So if you're wondering why all of a sudden everything ducks in the middle of a session when you're throwing some mastering compressors on it, you might want to take a look at your clicks and pops because those things are absolutely brutal when you're looking at that kind of stuff. So zooming into your files here, taking a look at them, if there's a tiny little click at the end, just drag that back a little bit and get it to fade that clip out of there so it's not messing with your compressors at the end of the day. Let's see, what else do we have here? Just as a quick example of how these clicks can trigger possibly a compressor, let's try to navigate to... Okay, noise for duck. This is his sidechain input, which again, just for organization reasons, I would probably put this right at the top of the track. Most of my tracks do have the sidechain input at the top, and I just name it sidechain input. Just makes things a lot cleaner. So anyway, we're going to look at this. He's got it sent to sends only, which is great. That's what you want. You don't want to hear your sidechain input. You don't want to hear your impulse signal. You want it sent to sends only, and then anytime you have a compressor that's going to reference this as the sidechain input, you just type that track in, and it'll still trigger the compressor even though the output of the track is sent to sends only. So just so that we can hear this, let's go to master and we'll solo it. You can hear that's a very, very, very short click sample. And just as a quick aside, I'm not sure that I would use a sample this short for a track like this. This is like kind of a disco house track, and those tend to have a lot fatter, chunkier kicks, and the bass lines. The whole composition of the track tends to be a little bit different. So for a track like that, I would have a little bit of a longer sidechain input. But regardless, in this example, you can hear this. It's basically just a click. Like this would be something that you could hear at the end of an audio sample. And they tend to be very loud if it comes from interference or something happens in the algorithm of the program where when you chop a sample at the inappropriate time, it puts one of those clicks in there. We saw it a little bit ago with the reverb tail example. No reason that little noise should have been there at the end, but it was. So you look at these kind of things and you think, oh, that's just a tiny little click. Well, this click is enough to drive all of the sidechain compression that's going on in the track. So if it can do that, now granted, the threshold value on the sidechain compressors is very, very low. It's going to be like -30 or somewhere thereabouts. It can still trigger other compressors. Like there are tracks that have nothing to do with sidechain compression where the compressors on those tracks have a very, very low value. So these things can affect those as well. Just another example of why cleaning up your session is important. Now, given the fact that we've talked about a lot of stuff so far, and you probably want to see an end result of what a more tidy session can look like and how much more visually, aesthetically pleasing that can be. Here's an example of this exact same track after I spent probably right around 3 hours going through each individual track, cleaning up all the clicks and pops, making sure that things were color coordinated, everything was arranged together in groups, and everything is looking a lot more tidy. So here's an example of that. There. That is much better. You have your reference track up here. You have your sidechain input up here. You have your drums and perk group. I always do, and this is Ableton 10, so you can see we have groups within groups here. I always have my kick and snare being the darker greens. This is something that Ty and I started when we were still doing 4/3/4 stuff. Normally I have this stuff colored, but looks like I must have overlooked that. Oops. You can see it's just so much more visually pleasing, and it not to get all mystical or anything like that, but this actually changes the way that you think and behave while you're working around your session. When you have something that's regimented like this, and you have something that you can look at and it looks very organized, it looks very professional, you will find yourself actually making better decisions in the session. Like it'll be more important to you. You feel like you have to play up to everything that's around you in that regard. So you can see how everything's organized. I can assure you I'm not going to go through everything, but I've gone through and topped and tailed everything. There's just a couple of effects here. I'm going to be adding more of those. The Vox group is actually going to be completely redone, but for now, everything is very, very organized. You can even, if you want to go further, you can collapse all of these down. Let's go here. And again, the only reason I didn't rename any of the stuff in this group, because I normally would, was because he told me that he was going to be replacing all of the vocal content in here. So didn't really see a need to waste time with that, but you can, just like that, if you want to. Now everything is collapsed. You can collapse that too. And that. So yeah, this is just, it's what you can look for. There are other things that you can do to organize the session a little bit more, as far as, and this gets into the concept of mix down a little bit more. Like for example, here in all of these crowd noises, you can see in each one of these tracks, if I just open up the view here, you can collapse your plugins down. That's another way to stay organized. If you're going to be working in them quite a bit, I recommend leaving them out like this. But you can see on each one of these tracks, I have a gate, an EQ gate. This will clean up some of your frequencies. And again, like I said, this is getting into mix down a little bit more, but just getting unneeded frequencies out of every track that are going to trigger compressors and things like that. That stuff is golden. I mean, you can go through here, and aside from actually going in here and making the edits yourself and cutting it, I was just doing this for a rough mix, so I just put a gate on, gave it a little bit of release time, so it acts like a fade as the track goes down. So, and again, you're not hearing it because I have the output of the overall Vox group turned off, so that's why you're not hearing it. Just little things like that. They clean up your session. However clean you can get the session, the better. You might have noticed that this is the one thing that's not color coded correctly, and that's just because I wanted to keep these MIDI notes in case he wanted to change them. But in a normal mix down scenario, that would not be there, and you can tell, this kind of proves my point a little bit, of how easy it is to tell when something's off in the session, because now that everything is color coded and it's very regimented like this sticks out like a sore thumb. So little things like that you can definitely pick up on. Let's say you're in the middle of working on this session here, and I don't want to give away too much of the track, so let's just... So let's say you're in the middle of working on this track and you hear a rogue sound, and you're in this section of the song right here, and you're like, where is that rogue sound coming from? Well, you know it's not anything in the string group, FX, Vox, pads, guitar, or bass. You know it has to be somewhere in one of these two groups, because those are the only two meter bridges that are running. So you go through and you play that section again, you're like, oh, I think that might be in the lead section. So you can go in there and you can tell, oh, it's coming from this track right here. There you go. Like you've just narrowed it down very quickly, instead of having to scroll through that large mess that we saw at the beginning and trying to figure out what track the unwanted noise is coming from. So I hope this at least painted a better picture as to why having your session organized is important. And hopefully you can use some of these tricks yourself in your future productions, and it will make you into a more efficient engineer. I guess that's it. Any questions you have for me, leave them in the comments below. I would say like and subscribe, but everybody says that. I don't want to say that. I guess just have a good day. That works. Yeah, have a good day.